The wind moved softly through the tall pines that bordered the wide Apache Valley, carrying with it the smell of distant rain and wild sage. Travelers often said the land felt alive in those parts, as if every stone and shadow held stories older than any written word. That evening, when the sun dipped low and painted the sky with burnt gold, the quiet village settled around their small fires. Yet in one handmade lodge near the river, a different kind of fire stirred, one born from worry, longing, and a hidden fear that had grown heavier with each moon that passed. Inside the lodge, a young woman sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her thoughts tangled like threads she could no longer untie. She had been brought into this land as a bride, welcomed into a people whose customs were different from all she had known. They treated her kindly. They shared their food, their warmth, their stories by firelight. But beneath every smile, she could feel the weight of something unspoken. The people wanted new life to come. They waited for the cry of a child to bless the lodge. Moon after moon passed, and nothing changed. She felt it in every glance, every soft sigh of the older women. Every prayer whispered at dawn. The one who felt her pain most deeply was the warrior she had married. He was known across the valley for his calm strength, a man shaped by the land itself. He carried the patience of rain and the steadiness of the mountains. Yet even he could not hide the growing worry in his eyes whenever he looked at her. She feared disappointing him more than anything. He had chosen her when he could have chosen any woman from his own people. He had brought her to his home with pride, and now she felt as though she had failed him. That night, he returned from a long day of riding across the ridge. Dust clung to his shoulders, and his dark hair hung loose around his strong face. When he stepped into the lodge, he found her sitting near the fire, her eyes lowered, her breath shallow. He knew that look. He had seen it too many times. It was the look of a heart carrying more weight than it could bear. He knelt in front of her without a word, gently lifting her chin so he could see her eyes. She tried to look away, but he wouldn't let her hide. Outside, the river rushed softly, and the lodge walls glowed with the warm flicker of firelight. He studied her face, as if trying to understand a language carved deep inside her. She finally spoke, her voice thin and trembling. She said she feared she would never be able to give him the child he deserved. She said the spirits must be angry with her, or that her body was not strong enough. She wondered if she should leave the village so he could choose another woman, one who could give him the family he needed. The warrior closed his hand around hers, firm enough to silence her fears, gentle enough to calm her shaking breath. His voice was steady, as if the land itself spoke through him. He told her that she was his heart, his chosen partner, not a vessel for promises she could not control. But he also knew the ancient ways of his people. He knew the old teachings passed down from the elders. He knew stories of couples who had once stood where they stood now, heavy with doubt, and how they had found answers in places most people never considered. When she didn't reply, he leaned closer. His shadow flickered across the soft furs beneath her, and the fire warmed the space between them. He spoke with a calm certainty that made her breathe a little easier. He told her that sometimes the earth gave life only when it saw that two hearts were truly ready to receive it. Sometimes a couple needed guidance, not from healers or herbs, but from the deep teachings of the tribe, teachings that were whispered only to those who needed them most. She looked at him then, truly looked, and saw no disappointment. Instead, she saw a quiet determination. It made her pulse quicken, unsure of what he would say next. He brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek, his touch slow and reassuring. Outside, thunder murmured far in the mountains, a sign that the world was shifting toward something new. Then he spoke the words that made her breath catch in her throat. He told her there was an old path that couples in their situation once walked. A path filled with knowledge, tradition, and trust. He said he would lead her along that path, step by step, without fear, without rushing. He said their people believed that the gift of new life was not only a blessing but a journey, one that required courage, unity, and a heart that was ready to understand more than the surface of things. Her voice shook as she asked him what that path was and what he meant by guiding her through it. She needed clarity. She feared hope as much as she desired it. He leaned in closer, the fire painting warm light along his shoulders. His voice lowered, deep and warm. He told her that there were old teachings passed down through generations about how a couple welcomes the possibility of life. He told her he wanted to show her those ways, gently and with patience, the way his people had done since long before either of them were born. With his hand over hers, he reminded her she was not alone. She had never been alone. But the moment held another layer, something the young bride didn't yet understand. His expression changed slightly, as though he carried a secret he wasn't ready to reveal. His eyes held a strange mix of confidence and worry, strength and hesitation. There was more to the old teachings than simple guidance. There were traditions tied to the land, to the spirits, to ancient promises made long before she had come to the village. Some teachings required tests of the heart. Some brought truth that could reshape an entire life. She felt her heartbeat quicken. She felt both fear and anticipation mixing inside her like two rivers meeting. She sensed something important was coming. Something that would change everything she thought she knew. About this man she had married and the people she now lived among. He touched her cheek once more, his thumb brushing away a tear she didn't know had fallen. His voice softened even more, deep but tender. He said, "I'll show you how our people bring new life into the world."
Ow.
The fire crackled. The thunder rolled again in the far mountains, and she felt the air shift around them as if the land itself had heard his promise. Before she could ask him what he meant or where this path would lead, a sudden rustle outside the lodge made the warrior stop and turn his head sharply. His expression changed, alert and watchful. Something or someone was just beyond the hide door. The night outside had gone strangely quiet, too quiet, as if holding its breath. He rose slowly to his feet, every muscle steady, every movement measured. The bride felt her chest tighten as the shadows near the entrance shifted. Whatever waited outside would set the course of everything that happened next. The warrior stood perfectly still, listening to the faint stir on the other side of the hide door. The young bride watched him, her breath caught in her chest. The fire cast long shadows that shifted across the lodge walls, making the moment feel even heavier. She felt the warmth from the furs beneath her knees. Yet a chill crept through her bones as she waited for what he would do next. The wind outside had gone soft, but there was a different sound now, something like feet brushing lightly across the dirt. He lifted his hand toward her, telling her without words to stay where she was. She nodded, even though her nerves tightened. She had never seen him look so focused. Not even in the moments when the village scouts returned with warnings of strangers near the ridge. He moved toward the door with calm steps, each one quiet but certain. The shadows beyond the entrance stretched and then disappeared as he pulled back the flap in a swift motion. For a long moment, nothing moved. Only the cool night air drifted in, carrying the smell of damp soil and pine smoke. She leaned forward, trying to see past him, but the darkness outside felt thick. Then a small figure emerged from the shadows. It wasn't an enemy or a wandering rider. It was one of the village children, a shy boy who often brought baskets of berries from the forest. His wide eyes glistened in the dim firelight. The warrior exhaled slowly, dropping his shoulders a little. He placed his hand on the boy's head, guiding him inside. The young bride felt herself breathe again, though her heart still beat fast. The child stepped in quietly, holding a small bundle wrapped in animal hide. His voice trembled as he explained that one of the elders had sent him with an offering. The village had noticed the couple's silence and worry, and the elders wished to give them blessings for strength. The warrior thanked the boy and dismissed him with a gentle pat. When the boy was gone, he placed the bundle near the fire and unwrapped it. Inside lay herbs wrapped with leather cords, smooth river stones carved with symbols of guidance, and a feather from a sacred bird that rarely appeared near the village. The bride touched the feather lightly, feeling its softness. These were not simple gifts. There were signs that the elders sensed something deeper behind the couple's struggle, something that needed more than ordinary comfort. The warrior watched her, reading her thoughts with ease. He knew she had come from a far place where customs were different and meanings were not always shared openly. She had tried to learn the ways of the tribe, but many things still confused her. He sat beside her and told her that the feather meant new guidance, the stones meant protection, and the herbs were used in old rituals for welcoming blessings from the land. She listened carefully, but a quiet question grew inside her. She finally asked if the gifts meant something was wrong. He didn't answer right away. The fire crackled between them, and she noticed how his eyes reflected the warm light. He said the elders believed that when the land sensed struggle in a home, it often sent signs through the people who carried the old teachings. The struggle didn't always mean failure. Sometimes it meant that a path needed to be walked with more understanding. That answer calmed her a little, not completely. She asked him again what he meant earlier when he said he would show her how his people welcomed new life. His silence before had filled her mind with too many thoughts. He narrowed his eyes slightly, as if deciding how much to tell her. He explained that there were teachings not spoken lightly, teachings that had to do with the connection between two hearts. Those teachings were old, passed from warrior to partner with deep trust, but he could not share them fully until he knew she was ready to hear everything without fear. She pressed him gently, wanting to understand what she needed to do. He took her hands in his and held them between his palms. His voice softened again. He told her that new life did not come only from wanting it. It came from balance. Balance between spirit and body, between hope and patience, between two people who trusted each other completely. Without that balance, no path could open. She listened to every word, but a tiny worry pinched inside her chest. She wondered if he thought she lacked that balance. Sensing her unease, he tilted her chin and assured her he did not doubt her heart. He knew she had given everything to this new life she had stepped into. She had learned the language, cooked by the fires with the women, helped carry water from the river, shown respect in every way she could. The problem was not her effort. Something else was shaping their struggle, something that neither of them had yet named. He stood again, moving to the entrance to look at the night sky. She followed him with her eyes, watching the way the firelight outlined his figure. He told her that the land had been restless lately. The elders whispered that the rains had shifted too early. The animals had taken strange paths, and the wind carried strange energy. When the land changed course, families in the village often felt its weight. Some found sickness, some found confusion, and some found barriers where once there had been none. It was not a curse, he said. It was a sign that something deeper was happening. She felt a cold shiver at his words. She had never thought that the land itself could influence the fate of a family. Where she came from, people blamed sickness, chance, or simple bad luck. She asked if he thought the land was blocking them from having a child. He hesitated again. Something in his silence worried her more than any answer could have. He finally explained that the village had always believed the land shared its spirit with the people. When the land was uncertain, life became uncertain. When the land grew quiet, new beginnings could stall. But the land also listened. It watched couples carefully. Sometimes it waited until it felt they were truly ready to be shaped by its blessings. The bride tried to absorb all of this, her heart trying to make sense of a world she was still learning. She felt something inside her shifting, not quite fear, not quite hope. Something in between. She asked him what they were supposed to do now. He turned back from the entrance and returned to her side. His eyes held a steady glow, as if he already knew the answer but had been waiting for her to ask. He said the first step was to seek the old place beyond the ridge, a place where couples once went to ask for guidance. That place was sacred. It held more than stories. It held echoes of the ancestors who had walked the land before them. She asked what they would find there. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he said they would find whatever truth they needed. He said some couples found peace, some found direction, and some found the courage to face what they feared most. His tone made her heart thump faster. She wondered what he feared, or if there was something he had not told her. Then he added something that tightened her breath. He said the journey to that place would not be easy. The path was steep, and the forest often challenged those who walked through it with heavy hearts. But he believed they needed to go there before he could teach her the old ways. The land had to hear their footsteps before it could offer anything. She sat quietly, absorbing his words. The fire beside them dimmed as the logs settled. She watched the embers glow red, thinking of the journey he spoke of. She felt both drawn to it and frightened by it. She asked when they would leave. He stepped closer to her, gently touching her arm. His voice dropped, low and firm. He said they would leave the next evening when the sky painted itself orange and the river lay quiet. They would take only what they needed and walk the path together. But before they could begin, he had to speak with someone. Someone who knew the old teachings better than anyone else in the village. She looked up at him sharply, sensing the seriousness in his tone. She asked who he meant. He paused, watching the firelight flicker across her face. He said there was an elder who held secrets that even he had never spoken of, and before she could ask him why or what those secrets were, a sudden knock struck the wooden post outside the lodge, firm and urgent. Stopping his words mid-breath, the knock at the post echoed louder than it should have, sharp enough to cut through the crackle of the dimming fire and the low hum of the river outside. The young bride straightened instinctively, her pulse racing. The warrior moved toward the entrance again, but this time there was no calm in his steps. His shoulders stiffened, and for a second she saw a trace of something she rarely saw in him: worry. He pulled back the lodge flap, and the night air poured in like a cold wave. A man stood outside, wrapped in a heavy hide cloak. Even before the bride recognized him, she sensed his presence carried weight. He was one of the village watchers, the kind of man who only visited homes in the night if something urgent pulled him away from his post. His face was stern, shadowed by the flickering light behind the warrior. He stepped inside with quiet respect, bowing his head slightly to the bride before turning to the warrior. The watcher spoke in their native tongue, his voice low. The bride didn't understand every word, but she caught enough to feel her stomach twist. Someone had been seen near the ridge, close to the sacred path. Someone who didn't belong to the village. The watchers had spotted tracks too large, too deep, too careless to be from anyone they knew. The man hinted that this stranger moved with purpose. And worse, he moved in the direction of the place the warrior had just mentioned. The warrior's jaw tightened. He asked the watcher if the elders had been warned. The man nodded. They were calling a quiet meeting before dawn. The watcher hesitated, glancing at the bride as if choosing his next words carefully. Then he said something the warrior didn't expect. The tracks had been followed for a short distance. They led toward the very grove where couples sought guidance when faced with troubles of the heart. The place was sacred, but it was also vulnerable. The warrior dismissed the watcher gently, thanking him. When the door fell shut again, the bride felt the weight of the room change. The warrior's eyes were darker now, his thoughts spinning far ahead of hers. She asked him what the visitor had said. He did not lie to her. He told her everything. The stranger could be anyone: a wanderer, a trader, or someone seeking shelter. But the timing was too sharp to ignore. The warrior explained that sacred places were not approached casually. If someone had gone there, it meant they were either lost, bold, or searching for something with more purpose than simple curiosity. And with the land already restless, the warrior feared the wrong presence could unsettle the balance even further. The bride tried to understand the full meaning of this, but her thoughts kept circling one point. Their own journey would lead them into the same forest, toward the same hidden place. She wondered if their path would cross with this unknown figure. She wondered if this person carried danger. It wasn't just their private struggle anymore. Something else had been drawn into the center of it. The warrior moved to sit beside her again, but his mind was far beyond the lodge walls. He told her more about the sacred place, speaking more openly than before. There was a legend woven through the tribe's history, one she had heard whispers of, but never fully. The place they were meant to visit was known for testing those who sought answers. The ancestors once guided couples through its challenges. Some couples returned closer than before, their hearts strengthened. Others returned troubled, their fears made sharper, and a few never returned at all. He said the land did not harm without reason. It simply reflected what people carried inside them. If someone walked into the grove with a heart full of anger or greed, the land showed them every shadow they tried to hide. That was why the elders were cautious. If a stranger with unclear intentions entered that place, the land could stir itself in ways that shook the entire valley. She listened, feeling the tension coil tighter. She asked him whether this stranger threatened their journey. He shook his head slowly, not in denial, but in uncertainty. He didn't know. That frightened her more than any answer. He told her they would still go. The land needed to hear their steps. If they delayed, the balance between them and the land might slip further. But now, they had to prepare themselves. Not only for their own struggle, but for whatever presence had entered the sacred ground. The bride lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of everything pressing around them. She had felt out of place before, unsure if she truly fit into the tribe. Now she felt something new. She felt as though she were standing in the center of a storm that had been building long before she arrived. The fight for new life suddenly felt woven with threads of something bigger than her own fears. The warrior noticed her silence. He touched her hand lightly, reminding her she wasn't walking this path alone. But even his touch felt different now. It carried a warning beneath its warmth. He told her more of the elder he needed to speak with before they left. The elder lived on the far edge of the village, closer to the hills than the river. He had once been a spiritual guide, but age had taken much of his strength. His mind, however, remained sharp. He carried stories the younger warriors never heard. The warrior believed this elder knew something about the sacred place that had not been spoken in many years. The bride asked why the elder would keep such knowledge hidden. The warrior's eyes darkened again. Some knowledge, he said, stayed quiet because people feared what it meant. Sometimes the truth forced families to face things they wished to ignore. Sometimes the truth revealed that the land's restlessness came from old wounds not yet healed. She wanted to understand, but her mind felt crowded with questions. She asked him if something in the sacred place could explain why new life had not come to them. He hesitated. Then he said that the land often guided couples toward answers they didn't expect. Sometimes the problem lived in the present. Sometimes it lived in the past. And sometimes, in rare cases, it did not belong to either partner, but to something carried through generations. His words wrapped around her like fog. She had never thought that something beyond her own body could influence her ability to conceive. The thought brought a new kind of fear, one she could not name. The fire crackled again, sending sparks upward. The bride's thoughts drifted back to the stranger in the forest. She wondered why someone would approach a sacred place in the night. She wondered if that person was seeking answers of their own, or something far darker. She wondered if their presence would shift the path she and her husband were meant to walk. The warrior finally stood, pacing the length of the lodge with slow steps. He was thinking loudly, even if he didn't speak. She watched him, unsure what thoughts weighed on him most. When he finally stopped, he said something she had not expected. He told her he feared the stranger might not be a wanderer. He feared it might be someone connected to an old dispute between families. A dispute that had quieted years ago, but had never truly ended. She remembered hearing the older women talk about old grudges, stories of broken agreements that had nearly torn the valley apart. She had never imagined those old wounds might reach into her own life now. The warrior explained that there had been a man from another group who once challenged the tribe's claim to the sacred ridge. The man believed that the land belonged to his ancestors and that the Apache people had taken it. The dispute ended without bloodshed, but not with peace. The man had vowed to return one day, though no one knew when or why. The bride felt a cold rush through her. She asked if he believed this man had finally come back. The warrior didn't answer, which meant he didn't know, which meant he feared it could be true. The shadows thickened along the lodge walls, and the fire dimmed further. Outside, the night deepened until it felt heavy enough to bow the trees. The warrior knelt beside her again and told her they must rest a little before dawn, because the next day would begin with answers or more questions. She tried to close her eyes, but sleep didn't come. She heard every shift of the fire, every rustle of grass outside, every breath the warrior took, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone out in the darkness was already walking the path they were meant to take, that someone was one step ahead of them, moving toward the same sacred place, waiting for them. The dawn came in slow, muted light, the kind that crept through the village as if unsure it was welcome. The bride rose before the warrior, though she hadn't slept more than a few moments. Her body felt tired, but her mind was too alert, too tangled with fear and questions. She watched the first hints of morning glow stretch across the lodge walls, feeling the weight of the journey they were about to take settle across her shoulders. When the warrior finally opened his eyes, he rose with the same steady calm he carried into battle. But she saw the tightness in his jaw, the way he paused before standing, as though preparing himself for something heavy. He reached for his bow, tested its string, then checked the small pouch he carried at his side. Everything about him, from his quiet movements to his focused stare, told her this day mattered more than any other since she had become his wife. When they stepped outside, the village was quiet. Smoke drifted from a few early fires, and the women preparing food glanced their way with looks full of worry and hope. The bride felt every gaze settle on her. Some were soft, encouraging. Others held silent questions. But she kept her posture straight. She didn't want them to see how shaken she was. The warrior led her to the edge of the village, where the old elder waited beneath a crooked tree. The elder's thin frame seemed carved from the same wood as the tree beside him. His hair hung in long gray strands, and his eyes had a distant, sharp glow, as if they saw more than what lay in front of him. He carried a small staff, decorated with symbols burned into it long ago. The bride lowered her head respectfully. The elder studied her for several long moments, then turned to the warrior, speaking in a voice roughened by age but still steady. He asked if they were ready to take the path, not just with their feet but with their hearts. The warrior answered with a simple nod. The elder lifted his staff and touched the bride's shoulder lightly. He spoke in slow words she didn't fully understand, but she felt their meaning settle over her like a cloak. He spoke of strength, of trust, of the land listening to those who walked it with truth. Then his eyes sharpened, and he looked between them with an expression that carried a hidden warning. He said the path ahead would show them what they carried inside, whether they wished it or not. She felt a tremor run through her. The warrior took her hand in his, as if sensing her fear. The elder stepped back and pointed toward the forest in the distance. He told them they must reach the sacred grove before nightfall, but they could not rush. The land listened more closely to hearts that walked at the right pace as they left the village behind. The forest swallowed them in tall shadows and the scent of damp earth. The trail wound through thick pines and narrow ridges. The bride stayed close to the warrior, watching the way he moved with certainty, as though the forest were an old friend guiding him. But the deeper they walked, the more she felt the weight of the unseen stranger who had come before them. She saw no tracks, but she sensed the warrior searching for signs. The morning grew warmer, though the air held a strange stillness. Birds perched silently on branches, watching them pass. Even the wind seemed reluctant to stir the leaves. The bride asked the warrior if he thought the stranger was ahead of them. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he said the forest had been quiet since the watcher had reported the tracks. Too quiet. That alone was troubling. After a long stretch of walking, they reached a narrow clearing where the sunlight fell in sharp beams through the trees. The warrior motioned for her to stop. He knelt and brushed his fingers along the dirt. She leaned closer and saw it too. A deep print. Fresh. Larger than the warrior's own footprint. It pointed toward the sacred grove. Her breath tightened. She asked what it meant. He said the stranger was ahead of them by maybe an hour. That was close enough to be dangerous. He rose and moved forward with more caution, scanning the trees. The bride felt herself stepping lightly, every sound magnified around her. A broken twig. A rustle in the grass. The distant cry of a hawk, circling high above them. She felt as though the forest watched every movement they made as they continued. The warrior began to speak in a quiet voice, telling her stories he had never shared before. Stories of couples who had once sought guidance in the sacred grove, how some walked into the forest carrying doubt and returned with hope. How others carried secrets that cracked open when the ancestors revealed them. He said the place they sought was not simply a location. It was a mirror for the spirit. The bride listened, her heart pounding with each tale. She wondered what the grove would show them. She wondered what secrets the forest held about their struggle to bring new life into the world. She wondered if the stranger ahead of them carried secrets of his own. By midday, clouds rolled over the sky, turning the sunlight dim. The air grew cooler, and a faint rumble of thunder whispered across the sky. The warrior paused again, sensing the change. He said the weather was shifting too quickly. The land was restless. The stranger's presence had disrupted more than the village's peace. As they moved deeper into the forest, the trees grew thicker, older, their trunks twisted as if shaped by years of wind and whispers. Moss blanketed the ground in soft, uneven patches. The bride felt goosebumps rise along her arms. This part of the forest felt different, heavy, ancient. She asked the warrior if they were getting close. He nodded. They crossed a narrow stream winding through the rocks, its water cold enough to sting her skin. The warrior helped her across, steadying her with a gentle grip. But even in that small moment, she saw the tension in his eyes. He was listening for something beyond their footsteps. The path climbed sharply after the stream, curving around boulders streaked with old carvings. Symbols of families. Symbols of blessings. Symbols of warnings. She touched one carving lightly, feeling its grooves. The warrior told her the carvings marked the path to the sacred place, guiding those who sought answers. But the carvings also faded with time, making the journey harder for those who didn't walk with clear intention. As they climbed, the forest darkened. The thick clouds swallowed the sun completely, leaving only a pale gray light filtering through the branches. The bride felt a chill crawl up her spine. She told the warrior she felt like they were being watched. He didn't dismiss her feeling. He said the ancestors often watched those who walked this far. But the ancestors were not the only ones. His words made her look over her shoulder, scanning the shadows between the trees. She saw nothing moving, but the sense of being followed pressed against her chest. She wondered if the stranger trailed behind them now, or if something older walked silently between the pines. They continued uphill until they reached a ridge. Overlooking a stretch of forest that seemed untouched by time, mist drifted between the trees below, curling upward like breath rising from the earth. The warrior pointed toward a cluster of towering oaks in the distance. He said the sacred grove lay just beyond those trees. Before they could continue, a sudden crack echoed through the woods. Not thunder, not falling branches. Something heavy snapping under weight. The warrior's hand shot to his bow. He stepped in front of her, eyes locked on the shadows to their left. She clutched his arm, fear gripping her as silence stretched across the forest. Then another sound came. A soft but steady footfall. Slow, deliberate. Someone was close. Too close. The warrior whispered for her to stay behind him. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears as she watched the trees, expecting a figure to emerge at any moment. Then the noise stopped. The woods went completely still. For a long moment they waited, neither moving nor breathing too deeply. The bride felt the tension coil tighter than ever, her thoughts spiraling. She wondered if the sacred grove held answers for them or a threat they were not prepared to face. The warrior finally motioned for her to move again. But now his steps were sharper, quickened by urgency. The bride followed close behind, feeling the anticipation build like pressure beneath her ribs. They descended toward the misty forest below, the trees closing in around them. Every sound, every creak, every whisper of wind felt like a message. Somewhere ahead, the sacred grove waited somewhere nearby. The stranger moved through the same shadows, and as they reached the edge of the ancient oaks, the bride felt the unmistakable sensation that whatever they were meant to confront was no longer ahead of them. It was already surrounding them. The bride felt her breath catch as the forest tightened around them. The ancient oaks, rising like quiet giants, mist curled around their feet, cool and thin, carrying the scent of wet earth and leaves that had fallen many seasons before. She sensed the unseen presence pressing in from all sides. But beneath that fear, she also felt a strange pull, as if the land itself was guiding her toward something she had carried inside her without realizing. The warrior lifted his hand, signaling her to pause. His eyes scanned the trees with sharp focus, listening for the slightest shift in the forest. When the mist parted ahead of them, she finally saw it, the sacred grove. The great circle of stones, worn smooth by time, the tall oaks reaching upward like silent guardians. The soft glow of filtered light settling in the center of the clearing, but before they could step into the grove, a shadow moved near the farthest oak. The warrior's bow rose in an instant. The bride froze. The figure stepped forward slowly, hands lifted, showing he carried no weapon. He was tall, dressed in worn hides, his face marked with the lines of a difficult life. He looked tired more than threatening. The warrior held his bow steady, demanding to know who he was and why he had entered a sacred place that was not his to walk. The stranger hesitated, then spoke with a rough voice that carried both pride and regret. He said he came not to harm but to seek something he had lost long ago. The bride watched the warrior's eyes narrow. She sensed recognition in his expression, a flicker of memory. The stranger explained that he belonged to the group who once disputed the claim to this land. Years ago, he believed the sacred place belonged to his ancestors. He had left the valley after the disagreement, carrying anger that turned into loneliness. But now he returned, because he wished to put an end to the old bitterness. He had heard rumors of the land changing and believed the unrest came from conflicts never healed. The warrior lowered his bow, slowly but kept a guarded stance. The bride felt the tension ease just a little. The stranger stepped closer, his voice softening. He said he had come to the grove to ask the ancestors for forgiveness, to end the thread of hostility he had carried in his blood. He admitted that he had walked too far into the grove, not understanding how sensitive the land was at this time. He feared his presence had stirred the spirits, and now he wished only to make peace. The bride sensed truth in his voice. His shoulders sagged with the weight of old battles, and his eyes held a silent plea. The warrior finally told him that this place was not a battlefield, nor a place for grudges. If the stranger wished for peace, he must enter the grove with an honest heart and ask for it openly. The stranger nodded, stepping back into the circle's edge. The warrior then turned to the bride, his expression gentler. He told her they had come here to find answers for themselves, not to fear shadows or the past. He offered her his hand, and she placed her trembling fingers in his. They stepped into the grove together. The air shifted instantly. The mist seemed to lift, the sounds of the forest softening, until the world felt wrapped in a quiet only meant for them. They walked toward the center stones, where the softest light fell. The bride's heartbeat slowed as if the land itself held her in its calm. The warrior knelt first, placing his palm on the warm stone. He told her to do the same. When she touched it, she felt a faint vibration, like the echo of a heartbeat deep within the earth. It frightened her at first, but then a warmth spread through her hand, up her arm, and into her chest. The warrior spoke quietly, his voice steady. He told the ancestors they had come seeking guidance for new life, not only for a child, but for the bond between them. He said they were ready to know whatever truth the land carried for them. The bride closed her eyes. Images came to her not frightening, but clear and gentle. She saw the village, the people who had welcomed her. She saw the moments she doubted herself, the fear she had carried, the silent tears she had hidden. Then she saw the warrior standing alone in the grove long before she came into his life. He looked younger, uncertain. She understood then that he, too, had carried worry long before their struggle with new life began. The grove revealed no curse, no fault in her or him. Instead, it showed a truth she had never imagined. She saw the warrior's mother, a woman with soft eyes and a tired face, sitting by a fire in the past. The ancestor spirits whispered that new life had always come late in his family line, not because of weakness, but because their children were born in moments of great change. When the land shifted and called for renewal, she and the warrior were not failing. They were simply being asked to wait for the right moment. When the vision faded, she opened her eyes with tears slipping down her cheeks. The warrior looked at her, understanding without needing words. He placed his hand over hers, saying softly that the land had spoken to her. She nodded and told him the truth she had seen. His expression softened with relief, gratitude, and something deeper. He leaned close and whispered that their journey had never been about failure. It had always been about walking together with trust. The stranger at the grove's edge watched quietly. He approached them again and bowed his head. He asked if the land had given them clarity. The warrior answered yes, and in return he asked the stranger what the grove had shown him. The stranger said he had seen his own anger reflected back at him, sharp and lonely. The grove had told him to let go of the old dispute, that the land had long chosen the Apache people because they cared for it with devotion. He wished no more conflict. The warrior extended his hand, offering peace. The stranger accepted it with gratitude. The bride felt a sense of calm settle over the grove, as if the ancestors approved of the mended bond. As they prepared to leave, the sky shifted. The clouds parted slightly, revealing a warm beam of sunlight that fell directly into the clearing. The bride felt a warmth rest on her shoulders, not just from the sun, but from something deeper. She felt the land accept their promise to walk forward without fear. They walked back through the forest with lighter steps. The tension that had followed them now fell away. Even the forests felt changed. Birds began to sing, the wind moved again, and the mist dissolved into gentle air. When they returned to the village, the elders gathered to hear what had happened. The warrior shared the story of the stranger seeking peace, and the message the ancestors revealed. The villagers listened with respect, relief spreading through them like sunlight. They welcomed the stranger as a guest, no longer as a threat. That evening, the bride and the warrior sat by the river. The water glowed with the last traces of daylight. She leaned against him, and for the first time since she had joined the tribe, she felt completely at home. The warrior told her that whatever came next, they would face it with unity and patience. He believed new life would come when the land was ready. Weeks passed with a peace the village had not felt in a long time. The stranger eventually left the valley with gratitude, promising to carry the message of unity to his own people. The land grew calmer. The rains returned in gentle rhythms. The elders smiled more often, and one quiet morning, long after the journey to the grove, the bride woke with a strange, gentle warmth rising through her body. She touched her stomach, feeling something new, something tender and growing. When she told the warrior, his eyes filled with a joy so pure it softened every line of his face. He held her close, whispering that the ancestors had kept their promise. The village celebrated with laughter and song. The land felt alive again, and the bride realized that their struggle had never been a burden. It had been a path leading them toward trust, unity, and a love shaped by patience. Their journey ended with hope, with blessings, and with the quiet promise of new life waiting to enter the world when the time was right.